Hey guys, welcome to my next prediction pick video. This time I'm going over UFC 284, Makhachev vs Volkanovski. This is like the last pay-per-view. It's a regional pay-per-view. This time it's in Perth, Australia, in front of 15,000 screaming Aussies. And yeah, they've tailored the card around trying to have some Anzac talent on there. So it's gonna be a good card for the Aussies. If we have a look, there's 13 fights on there, and I just wanted to make a quick mention of the fights that got pulled off the card. I know this wasn't confirmed, but if we ever got Robert Whittaker and Paula Costa, that would have been an unbelievable scrap. Kai Kara France and Alex Perez was meant to be on the card, so that would have been a great fight for figuring out who's the next contender for the flyweights. And then what I was particularly interested in was Junior Tafa was making his debut, and he was actually going up against Cortez Acosta, who's 9-0, 9 KOs. So this would have been an absolute banger as well. Bit of a shame that we've lost those 3 fights. But hey, we've still got some good fights on there. Just want to quickly say thanks to all the new subscribers and for the interactions on the last video. Appreciate it, and let's get into it. Right, first fight of the night. We actually don't have an Aussie. We've got Russia going against Brazil. We got Zubaira Tukhugov taking on Elves Brenner. So Tukhugov, he's 32. He's won 2 of his last 5. To be honest, he's a bit of a hot and cold fighter. Sometimes he looks really good, and then other times he looks pretty flat. He's quite physically strong for the division. He's got a split decision against Renato Moicano, so that's aged really nicely over the last couple of years. He's got good control when he's on top of his opponents, but I've got to say he doesn't really do much while they're down there. He controls them, but he doesn't throw particularly nasty ground and pound. He gets pretty noticeably tired in the 3rd round, and it seems like whenever he takes a step down in competition, he just absolutely smokes them, but then when he's fighting people that are quite good, he makes it look really close. And he doesn't fight very frequent. If we have a look, in his last 5 fights, it goes all the way back to, 6 years ago against Renato Moicano. So he's pretty infrequent fighter. Next we've got Brenner. He's 25. He's won 3 of his last 5. He's shown to have some pretty decent striking. He's constantly on his bike, mixes in kicks and spinning attacks into his arsenal. What's a bit concerning is when you watch his tape and it turns into a bit of a scrap, he usually shells up and gets hit a lot. He goes for takedowns, but usually they're either stuffed or reversed most of the time. And it just seems like his takedown defense is a big weakness of his. When he gets taken down, he gets controlled usually and takes a bit of a hiding. He's got some questionable fight IQ. When he's on the ground and someone's ground and pounding him, he'll just be throwing punches from the bottom. It should be a competitive fight on the feet, but I just think Tukhugov's much more of a well-rounded fighter. He's got the power, and he should easily be able to take Brenner down. Brenner's not good at stopping takedowns, and Tukhugov, he's got a pretty nasty ground game. Also, I just see Tukhugov taking him down and controlling him, and I actually expect him to win this by ground and pound. So the next fight we've got is Blake Bilder taking on Shane Young. He's making his debut at 32. He's a bit late to the game, and he's 7 wins, 1 draw, hasn't lost yet. He's got his own unique stand-up, to be honest with you. He's got some nasty leg kicks. He's got looks to have some good BJJ, throws up nice triangles, other submission attempts when he gets the chance. He's proved he's got a lot of heart. I remember watching this fight where he got absolutely rocked in the 1st round, somehow survived and managed to choke the guy out unconscious. He had another impressive win on the Contender Series where he did the seamless transition from throwing a jab to somehow taking their back and then choking them out in the 1st round. So that was really impressive as well. Seems like his big weakness though is he really struggles getting back to his feet when he gets taken down. And he's got a bit of a questionable chin. There was a fight on the regional scene and he gets dropped 3 times hard in the 1st round, somehow survived, rallied back in the 2nd, and then knocked them out in the 3rd. So yeah, this guy, he just never stops coming forward. You think he's done and he just somehow flips the script and wins the fight. It's pretty incredible. He's taking on Shane Young, who's 13-6, 29. won 2 of his last 5, made his debut against Volkanovski when he was 24, got absolutely outclassed, but no shame there. He's had some occasional success in the UFC. He looked good against Dai and got a TK on the second, and he's got some pretty decent get-up game when he gets taken down, has a good gas tank, showed heaps of improvement in his last fight, mixed in a bit of fence control and takedowns, which we hadn't seen from him before. And he's also got a bit of a questionable chin. Got knocked out a couple of fights ago, and he kind of just eats jabs with his face sometimes, which is a bit worrying. Gets his face all busted up. I do favour Shane Young in this fight if it stays standing, and I think Shane's pretty live for a KO. I just have this strange feeling that Bilder's going to get dropped early and rally back again, like I've seen multiple times before in his fights. I think he's just going to pull Shane down, pull off some wild submission, and to be honest, I think he's going to give Shane his first submission loss of his career. I think it's definitely a pick'em fight. I could see Bilder being a bit of an underdog as well, and hey, if there's good money on Bilder winning by submission, then I think there's actually quite a lot of value there. I'm a Kiwi, so I'm going to be cheering for the Kiwi in this fight, but I've got to be honest with you, I think he's getting choked out by Bilder. Here I've got Bilder by submission. Only women's MMA fight of the night, it's strawweight. Loma Lookboonmee from Thailand taking on Elise from the States. Now Lookboonmee, she's 27, 7-3 record, won 3 of her last 5. Noticeably, she's 5'1" and used to fight Muay Thai at 100 pounds, where she's a multiple world Muay Thai amateur champion. But she looks a bit undersized in the cage at 115 pounds. She's got her own signature move, which is her Thai clinch, and it's actually nasty. She throws heaps of knees. She's got some deadly elbows. When she's at range, she's got thudding leg kicks. She's got good takedown defense and actually seems to reverse the takedowns quite a lot and ends up on top. Her ground and pound's nasty. In the Gomez fight, she completely busted her open with some slicing elbows, and she actually showed real good submission defense in that fight as well. She's shown she's actually quite strong for her size, but she looks pretty susceptible to being taken down by a strong wrestler. She got pieced up on the feet by Angela Hill in one of her first fights in the UFC, which was a bit of a tough test. And she hasn't really shown a terrific ground game on her back. Doesn't throw up much submissions and gets controlled on the ground a bit. She's taken on Elise who's 30, 6-2 in 3 of her last 5. She's had a pretty average start to her UFC career, going 2-2. But watching her on the regional scene, she's been pretty impressive. She had the opportunity to show some more striking. She looked like she had some nice combos, threw some knees, threw some head kicks, got a couple of KOs. And her best showing in the UFC must have been her most recent fight, where she showed improved stand-up. She seems quite prone to being held against the fence, which is quite worrying in this matchup, and doesn't have good takedown defense and has a pretty terrible ground game. Here I think Lookboonmee is definitely more well-rounded. Lookboonmee struggled against wrestlers, but Elise just hasn't shown that she's got that wrestling ability to take Lookboonmee down. Lookboonmee usually has a problem with her size, but I don't think it's going to be a problem here because Elise isn't much of a big strawweight, and Elise actually her first fight was in atomweight, so she's not overly big strawweight. I think Lookboonmee's just going to piece her up on the feet, and I've got Lookboonmee to win a clean decision here. Lookboonmee and Michelle Wooderson are the type of fighters that make you want there to be an atomweight division, because it'd be nice to see what they could do against women their size. Right, we've got a featherweight fight up next, and we've actually got an Aussie this time. It's Jack Jenkins taking on Don Shameless Shainis. Now, Jack Jenkins, he's 29, 10-2, 5 of his last 5, and he's making his UFC debut. And this guy's biggest advantage is just how much of a workhorse he is. He's just constantly pressuring his opponents. He's got some unreal cardio. And he showed on the regional scene that he can actually go a hard 25 minutes. He's got good takedowns, and he's really controlling when he gets it there. And he had a real dominant grappling performance on the Contender Series, which got a lot of eyes on him. Kind of looks like there's something to be desired in his striking. He looks a bit stiff, but I mean he's not terrible, and he's got some decent kicks. He's going up against Don Shainis, who's 31, won 4 of his last 5, and he's 12-4. Apparently this guy's 5'6", but I mean I wouldn't be surprised if he's like 5'4". He's honestly not bad. He's a bit small for the weight class, but he's just a pit bull with how he fights. He just comes in swinging, closes the distance, and tries to do dirty boxing. He mixes in a bit of wrestling, but I mean, this is against trash cans on the regional scene. And he doesn't seem bad when he's scrambling after he gets taken down. But I mean, this guy made his debut against Sodiq Yusuf, and he was a plus 700 underdog. Sodiq was a negative 1,000 favourite, and it turned out exactly how the odds would presume. He got absolutely steamrolled in less than 60 seconds. And I just think it's pretty clear this Don Shane, this dude, is the type of fighter the UFC are just going to throw at these young prospects to get them on their feet, get them to shake off some UFC shivers if they've got some. And I just think, even though Jack Jenkins doesn't have the best striking, he's got better striking than Don Shainis. He's got way better grappling. And I just expect this to be a dominant debut where Jenkins takes him out in the first. And I just wouldn't be surprised if this is unplayable and Jack Jenkins is just another negative 1,000 favourite against this guy. I've got Jack Jenkins for a nice debut at home. Right, one of the most entertaining fights of the night, we got a lightweight scrap between the Aussie, Jamie Mullarkey, taking on the debuting Argentinian fighter, Francisco Prado. Now, Mullarkey's 28, 15-5, and won 3 of his last 5. His stand-up originally looked a bit stiff when he got in the UFC, but he's been improving fight by fight, and he's actually had a couple of knockouts back-to-back, a beautiful hook against Kamal Worthy into a KO against Devontae Smith. He's got relentless pressure. He works well with his range, and he's pretty fast. He's not afraid to do some clinch work, make the fight a bit boring, but it's pretty obvious he's always trying to take the fight to the ground. The problem is when it gets to the ground, he doesn't really have particularly nasty chokes or ground and pound. He's just controlling the fight and just grinding out the win, basically. There's been moments in fights where he looks pretty hittable as well, especially when people rush him. In some fights, he's either looking like an absolute killer, and then other times he's winning a split decision to Michael Johnson or getting beaten to a pulp by Jalen Turner. So it's a bit hit or miss lately. He's going up against Francisco Prado, and Francisco Prado, he's 11-0, making his debut, and he's only 20 years old. Now, this guy's got a real fan-friendly fighting style. He swings leather in every fight, and he's just been running through the Argentinian regional scene. He's fought 8 people in the last 2 years, finished every opponent, and I'd recommend just going and watching his fights because you can probably watch all of them in, I don't know, half an hour. He sort of reminds me of like a young Argentinian Paulo Costa. He's super aggressive, swings wild, he's got big power, super fast. He's got absolutely nasty ground and pound. He's just got some questionable takedown defense, and he's shown to struggle getting back to his feet sometimes. But I have seen him have some slick submission attempts and choke some people out cold while he's on his back. So he's got some pretty slick BJJ. He could really be a big star for Argentina. Santiago's getting a bit old, and they need someone new to cheer for. Jamie Mullarkey, I mean, he's a massive step up in competition, and the biggest thing going against Prado is his takedown defense, being 20 and being unproven on the big stage. But I just think Mullarkey's going to get a bit wild in front of 15,000 Aussie fans. He's had some success with his hands lately, and I think Prado's just going to sleep him in a breakthrough performance that puts him on the map. Give me the underdog, Francisco Prado, for a first-round knockout. Up next, we've got a fun flyweight fight. It is Kleydson Rodrigues going up against Shannon Ross, who's making his UFC debut. Rodrigues is 27, got a 7-2 record, won 4 of his last 5, showed real nice striking on the Contender Series, a real diverse range of attacks. He's got good kicks, nice jabs, good feints, throws some spinning attacks in there. Shown to have a good gas tank. He can go 15 minutes hard. He does slow down kind of halfway through the third, but he's still got some pop to his punches. He's got some pretty average takedown defense, but every time he gets taken down, he does spring straight back to his feet. And he lost a hard split decision in his UFC debut against CJ Vergara. That's a hard debut for anyone, and like I said, it could have been anyone's fight. If he just did a little bit more, it would have been his, but Vergara getting a couple of takedowns, I think he definitely deserved to win. On the other hand, he's taken on Shannon Ross. And Shannon Ross, he's making his debut at 33 years old. He's 13-6 record, won 3 of his last 5. And this guy's spent his whole career fighting on the Australian regional scene. It's basically now or never for him. He's got good cardio. He was actually looking really good on the Contender Series until he got knocked out on the second. So it is a bit unusual that he got KO'd on the Contender Series and they're still signing him to the UFC. But, I mean, it makes sense. He was looking pretty decent up until then, and he's an Australian fighter, so why not just give him a chance while the UFC are in Australia. He's got some pretty average stand-up, though, and it looks like he's got a pretty sus chin. I've seen him get rocked and dropped and even choked out a few times. I think it's going to be Rodrigues here pretty clearly. I think Rodrigues is just going to work him out on the feet and possibly finish him in the first. But Ross is pretty tough, so I could see it going to a decision, but give me Rodrigues by KO in the second round. And I think Rodrigues is actually a real hot prospect to watch. We should keep an eye on him. All right, in a unbelievable featherweight fight that has Fight of the Night written all over it, really, is Joshua Culibao taking on Melsik Baghdasaryan at featherweight. So Culibao, he's 28, 10-1-1 record, won 3 of his last 5. He's got a real fun, fan-friendly style. He's real light on his feet, got nice in and out range management, a nice long reach. He can easily go 15 minutes. He's got some brutal ground and pound that you saw in the regional tape. He's got good killer instinct as well. When he has someone hurt, he really goes in for the kill. But his problem is he leaves his chin quite high in the air. He's got a good chin, but he does leave it straight up. He's got some pretty weak takedowns, but I don't think that's going to matter here with Melsik. And he got dominated by Jalen Turner, both on the ground, and then got pieced up on the feet and ended up losing it by TKO. But we've got to remember, I mean, that was his UFC debut, and Jalen Turner's turning into a top 15 fighter, so it's a pretty hard UFC debut, really. On the other hand, we've got Melsik Baghdasaryan, who's 31, 7-1 record, and won 5 of his last 5. He's a very good kickboxer, and he's been kickboxing at the highest level for years. He's got absolutely fucking nasty technique. His body kicks are nasty, his elbows, his knees, his uppercuts, his kicks. This guy's coming to take your head off. His Contender Series fight was quite impressive. The UFC were doing this big promo on the guy he was fighting. The guy he was fighting was saying, I'm going to be the best fighter in UFC history, just you watch. And Baghdasaryan just came out and just... it was a competitive 3-round fight, but he just came out and ruined the hype train, really. He just came out to kill. He got a real nasty head kick KO in his UFC debut. But what worries me with this guy is I've seen in his interviews and the commentators talking back in his K1 fights that he had a real serious shoulder injury. I mean, it's coming up 6 years ago now, but I hope he doesn't have lingering effects. I mean, you just think of TJ Dillashaw. I mean, nothing could be quite as bad as his. He seems like he's got some cardio issues. He looks absolutely deadly in the first, and then he loses a bit of pop in the second. And I have seen him kind of look a bit gassed out. But in his last fight, he actually took a real patient approach, and it looked like he knew that he gassed out a bit, so he changed his fighting style a bit. He looks like he's got some pretty average takedown defense, and he can get held against the cage. I wouldn't be surprised if Joshua starts getting pieced up on the feet and starts going for takedowns. Both fighters are super fun to watch. They absolutely come to knock the other's head off. It's literally a flip of a coin. I don't think you can confidently say either way in this fight. But I'm going to go Baghdasaryan to pull off the win, either by KO or by decision. I could see both happening. Right, next up we've got a light heavyweight fight between Tyson Pedro and Modestas Bukauskas. Now Pedro is 31, 9-3 record, won 3 of his last 5. He made his UFC debut when he was pretty green at only 4-0. He had a couple of impressive wins against Khalil Roundtree and Paul Craig, particularly the Paul Craig fight. He bullied him the whole fight, pinned him against the cage and won by some pretty nasty ground and pound. He was looking extremely promising, had heaps of eyes on him, looked like the next big thing out of Australia, and then they put him in there against Latifi, and Latifi just absolutely
ragdolled him with his grappling. He gets thrown in there against OSP. OSP drags him to the ground in the first and then nearly snaps his arm off. And then the UFC put him in there against an aging Shogun, and Shogun just takes him down in the second, beats the shit out of him, gets a 10-8 round, and then finishes him by ground and pound in the third. He took 3 years off after these losses, and now he came back last year, got a couple of first-round TKOs against the absolute bottom-of-the-barrel competition the UFC have to offer. It's a bit hard to see where Pedro's at in his career. He's got this gaping hole in his grappling game. He did take 3 years off, so you'd expect him to have gone and fixed some things, but he didn't get tested in his last 2 fights with grappling, so we wouldn't know. Bukauskas, on the other hand, he's 28, 13-5, won 2 of his last 5. This guy had heaps of success before he made it to the UFC. He had finished about 90% of his fights. But when he got signed to the UFC, he struggled. He lost 3 fights in a row and got cut. Now he's bounced back with a couple of wins outside the UFC, and Tyson Pedro's original opponent had to pull out of the fight. So now he's getting a short notice call-up and getting another chance to fight in the UFC. This guy's a multiple-time British kickboxing champion. He's got some pretty decent combos. Looks like he's got a real pop to his punches for about 5 minutes, and then he really does gas out. He fights with his chin high in the air, looks a bit hittable. He's got some pretty terrible defense by the looks of it, and whenever it gets into a firefight, he gets clocked quite a bit. Here, I think Tyson Pedro should be able to get a nice clean win. The truth is, Pedro really struggles when he takes a step up in competition, but I don't think Bukauskas is that step up in competition. I think he should run through him. And yeah, give me Tyson Pedro by first round KO. Alright, next up, continuing on with the light heavyweight division, we got Jimmy Crute taking on Alonzo Menifield. Now, Crute, he's 26, which is actually kind of crazy because he's been around in the UFC for a long time. He's 12-3 record, won 2 of his last 5. He's always been in entertaining fights. He's 3-3 in his last 6, and all 6 of those fights have ended in the first. He looks for submissions. He's got a pretty nasty Kimura. He's had moments where he's shown some pretty decent stand-up in the UFC, like against Bukauskas. He got this clean knockout. But then there's been other times where he's been a bit sloppy in his scrambles, like against Paul Craig. He had a pretty weak takedown defense, but showed he's got a decent get-up game. He took a big step up in competition in his last fight. He took on Anthony Smith and Jamal Hill, and they both ended pretty bad for him. He got finished in the first round in both. In the Smith fight, he just got constantly jabbed, and then Smith kicked his leg, and he got limp foot. So the doctors called the fight off at the end of the first. And then in the Hill fight, that was terrible. He literally got knocked out twice in 90 seconds, which cannot be good for the brain. He's going up against Menifield, though, who's 35, 13-3, and won 4 of his last 5. This guy is super powerful. He's got explosive actions. He's got big looping power shots. He's got some nasty ground and pound. He's got some pretty decent takedown defense. His only problem is he gets pretty visibly tired after the first round. It seems like he's either got an insane first round and then gasses through the rest of the fight, or he tries to pace himself, but he doesn't throw too much. He rocked OSB in their fight. They got a bit wild, and he went to try and take him out, left his chin in the air and got slept because of it, which was a bit rough. But he's bounced back, and he's looked super impressive in his last couple of fights, particularly 2 KOs, one by some nasty ground and pound, and the other one he just completely destroyed Serkinov. Honestly, I think this is a super close fight, but to be honest, I think Menifield's going to get a knockout. After the year layoff, the pressure of fighting at home, he's just going to get a bit wild and get knocked out by Menifield because of it. Alright, next up we got the heavyweights. We got bad man Justin Tafa taking on Parker Porter. Tafa, he's 29, 5'3", won 2 of his last 5. Came out wild in his debut. He just went running at his opponent and got knocked out cold because of it. He came out more patient in his second fight, showed some nice leg kicks and got himself a nice clean knockout with this beautiful hook into a nasty uppercut. He's shown to shell up a bit in certain fights, but then there was also this fight that was actually insane. In the last 30 seconds, he just played rock and sock and robots. It was probably some of the best 15 seconds in the UFC I've ever watched in my life as a fan. He lost a decision to Jared Vandera, and that's kind of aged pretty bad because Vandera went 1-6 in the UFC, and he's now been cut. His only win was against Justin Tafa, and he actually pieced Justin Tafa up on the feet. On the other hand, he's taken on Parker Porter. Parker Porter, he's 13-7. He's getting up there in age. He's 37, turning 38. He's won 3 of his last 5. He's got absolute tree trunks for legs. He comes forward to throw down. He's got quite a heavy output. He doesn't mind holding his opponents against the fence and going for takedowns. And when he does get a takedown, he's quite good on top. He just uses his size well, doesn't let them get back up. He was on a decent 3-fight win streak. And I've been thinking how this fight's going to go, and I've been going back and forth. I originally thought Justin Tafa by KO, but if Parker Porter goes out and just decides to scrap with Justin Tafa, he's an idiot. So I think what he's going to do is he's going to try and press Justin Tafa against the fence, wear on him, take him down, and just not let him get up, completely gas him out. And I think Parker Porter is going to outwork Justin Tafa. I'm hoping for the Justin Tafa KO, but I can see a world where Parker Porter wins a decision on the cards. Give me Parker Porter by decision in a fight that was meant to be a barn burner, but I think it's actually going to be pretty slow paced. Alright, I cannot wait for the next fight. It's at welterweight, and it's Rude Boy Randy Brown taking on possibly the hottest prospect in all of MMA, JDM, Jack Della Maddalena. Now, let's start with Brown. Brown, he's 32, he's 16-4 record, won 4 of his last 5. He's pretty huge for the division at 6'3". He's got some nice submissions in the UFC. He's been coming into his own recently, and he's on a 4-fight win streak. He's been looking the best he's ever looked in his last few fights. He's been putting on heaps of pressure. He's been showing some diverse striking. He rolls with his punches. He uses his range well. He's got some nasty front kicks to the body. He's got some average takedown defense, struggles getting back up. And it was a bit concerning when I watched his fight with Bilal Muhammad because they looked pretty even on the feet. And Bilal's not really known for his striking. He got held down by Mickey Gall. He's got a seriously concerning chin. He's been rocked multiple times in his fights, and he got knocked out by Nico Price when Nico Price was on the bottom, and that doesn't happen very often. And then he got brutally knocked out by Vincent Luque. So I think his chin is something that's definitely going to get tested again in this fight, especially when he's going against Maddalena, who's 26, 13-2, won 5 of his last 5. He's very physically strong. He's got some insane pop to his punches. He's got a bunch of absolutely vicious KOs on the Australian regional scene. He's got very nice boxing, crisp, clean technique, absolute nasty combos. He's got a nose-shattering jab, keeps his hands high, his chin down, mixes it all together well, puts on heaps of pressure. He had a rough start to his career, losing his first 2, but that was back when he was 19, and he turned it around with 9 finishes in a row. He's been looking like an absolute killer in the cage. When his opponent's hurt, he goes for the kill. I'd even go as far as saying that he's the biggest prospect Australia's ever had. All his finishes in the UFC have been by first-round KO. I was trying to find things that he's bad at, and he just really hasn't shown it yet in any of his fights. He's been trapped in a couple of chokes, but he always just powers his way out of it, seems to get out of it. He's good at scrambles. I sat there and I watched the whole career of Randy Brown, and I've got to say I'm not that impressed. He seems to be putting things together better as of late, and he is on a nice 4-fight win streak, but he's not impressed me anywhere as much as JDM has. JDM is just making everyone he fights crumble in front of him. He's got an unbelievable jab. He's got clean, crisp combinations. And I think this guy's got everything it takes to be a top 10 fighter or even a title contender. And it gets me super excited as a fan just thinking about Jack Della Maddalena being in the top 10 of the welterweight division and just getting matched up with people like Edwards, Rachmanov, Shemaev, Usman, Covington, Burns. He's going to be a welcome addition to the top 10 of welterweight. I've got Jack Della Maddalena by first round KO. Right, next up we got the co-main event. It's a UFC interim featherweight championship fight between Yair Rodrigues and Josh Emmett. Rodrigues, he's 30, coming into his prime. He's 14-3, won 3 of his last 5. He's got a very flashy, fan-friendly stand-up style. He's got some of the best kicks in the UFC. He's shown lately he's not afraid to wrestle, and he's pretty good at taking the back. His style's definitely better at range, and he struggles quite a bit when people start pressuring him. And he's showed that grappling is just a big hole in his game. I've got to say, this has got to be the most least deserved title fight in UFC history. And if you can think of anything more least deserved, let me know in the comments, but I can't. Let's get into it. He beats Alex Caceres, Bruce Leroy, by a split decision back in 2016. Then they put him up against BJ Penn, who's completely washed, hasn't fought in 4 years, and he wins. Then he goes up against Frankie Edgar, who absolutely destroys him for 2 rounds, and they have to stop it because he's just gotten his ass kicked so hard. Goes up against Chang Sung Jung, the Korean zombie, loses 25 minutes of a 25-minute fight, and then in the last second, when the horn's blowing, he knocks out Korean zombie with this unbelievable upwards elbow, which is kind of looked like a fucking fluke, if you ask me. It was unbelievable to watch, but it was fluky as. So he gets his ass kicked for 25 minutes, wins. Goes up against Jeremy Stephens, who's on a 3-fight losing streak, and who goes on to be on a 6-fight losing streak, and he wins. Then he goes up against Max Holloway and loses a decision, looks good for a couple of rounds, and then gets his ass kicked. Goes in against Brian Ortega, gets taken down in the first round. Brian pops his shoulder out, freak injury, and he wins the fight. And now he's getting a title fight. I don't think he should have ever been given this title shot. It should have been Arnold Allen versus Josh Emmett. But hey, here we are. We've got Yair Rodrigues, Josh Emmett, deal with it. So if we look at Josh Emmett, he's 37, 18-2, won 5 of his last 5, throws power in every shot. He brutally slept Lamas with a vicious hook, which was pretty nuts. Knocked out Michael Johnson, which is pretty impressive because Johnson's only been knocked out twice in his whole career. He puts a lot of pressure on, does a lot of feinting, doesn't really go for much takedowns, and he can get himself quite outpointed because he starts pretty slow. Oh, and I just want to get into quickly his loss against Jeremy Stephens. He gets KO'd by Jeremy Stephens, and you look at that and you think, oh yeah, Jeremy Stephens must have just knocked him out like he knocks a lot of people out. But it was dirty as. Jeremy Stephens clips him with this beautiful hook, and he goes to the ground. He's like cross-eyed. He looks about out of it. But he straight away starts making his way back to his feet. He's got both hands on the mat, and Jeremy Stephens with this dirty as knees him in the top of the head, and then while he's still grounded, punches him directly in the back of the head, and then Josh Emmett falls over and he gets his lights taken out with 2 absolutely career-altering, life-changing elbows from Jeremy Stephens. So, I mean, Jeremy Stephens probably was going to win that fight if he didn't throw those dirty shots, but, I mean, it just made it really controversial, and if you go back and you watch the fight, I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that should have been a DQ. But whatever. Anyway, since then, he's bounced back with a nice 5-fight win streak. He showed that Calvin Kattar fight, I mean, that was a close split decision. I thought Emmett won. I think he had round 1, 3, and 5, but hey, it was close. I think this fight's going to be quite fun to watch. I've been quite impressed with Emmett after watching his whole career. He's got an iron chin. He's incrementally got better fight by fight. He definitely deserves this title shot. He's 37, getting up in age. Even though I've only seen Emmett go for like 2 takedowns in his whole career, I think it would be pretty good for him to try a takedown against Rodrigues since that's such a big hole in his game. And even on the feet, I like Josh Emmett's chances. He just throws heat into every punch. I could see him struggling a bit in the first couple of rounds, but then just completely outworking Rodrigues and getting a TKO in the 4th or the 5th. Give me Josh Emmett to become the new interim champ, and I'm actually quite excited to see Emmett versus Volkanovski. One of Volkanovski's most entertaining fights he's ever had was against Chad Mendes, and I see a lot of similarities in a Chad Volk fight with an Emmett Volk fight. Give me Emmett by 4th or 5th round TKO. Right, for the main event of the evening, we've got quite possibly the highest level fight on paper the UFC has ever made. It is Islam Makhachev, the lightweight champ, the number 2 pound-for-pound fighter in the world, taking on Alexander the Great Volkanovski, the featherweight champ who's moving up a division and who's the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world. Islam, he's 31, got a 23-1 record, won 5 of his last 5. Main thing about Islam's obviously his grappling. Just absolutely smothers his opponents, makes it look extremely difficult for people to get up once they get taken down, makes taking people's backs look easy, always looks for the choke. He's got beautiful sambo throws, nasty ground and pound, absolutely destroys anyone that's got average grappling. He's got good takedown defense himself. When it's on the feet, he keeps his hands up, and he's actually got quite decent power. He's dropped a few of his opponents, but in certain fights and at certain situations, he actually looks pretty sloppy and looks pretty hittable. His tougher fights in the UFC against good grapplers. He had a very competitive grappling fight against Sayukian. Earlier in his UFC career, he actually got taken down by this guy called Wade, who had a pretty similar build to Volkanovski. He was a stocky, short fighter, and he took Islam down in the first round. Islam was on his back and actually couldn't get up for the whole round, which I thought was quite interesting. He fought Ramos, who's also a good grappler. They cancelled each other out, and the fight just took place on the feet for the whole 15 minutes. He got a bit sloppy in his second fight in the UFC. He was throwing some overhands, running forward, and got absolutely knocked out with a brutal shot a couple minutes in. And if you haven't seen Islam get knocked out by that shot, you should look it up, because it is actually nasty. It makes you think that you really need someone with heaps of power to be able to take him out like he did. He's always... and he actually got his knees buckled in the Ramos fight to a nasty jab, so I thought that was something to note. He's been caught in people's headlocks in multiple fights. He always just powers his way out of it, but it's quite interesting, his style of grappling. He does have his neck outs to be taken, and he's shown that he can get pressed against the fence in a couple of his fights, but he usually just reverses it. And he's taken on Alexander the Great Volkanovski, who's 34, 25-1, won 5 of his last 5. He's pretty short at 5'6", but what's actually surprising is he's got a 182 centimeter reach, which is 3 centimeters longer than Islam. Puts on a lot of pressure. He starts fast, finishes fast, goes a hard 25. He's got very technical striking. He uses his reach. He's got a good jab. He's shown that he's got a real good chin. He's been taken down in the past, but every time he gets taken down, he's working his way to the cage, making his way back to his feet, or he's making scrambles to get back to his feet. He's got multiple finishes by ground and pound. But what's interesting is a big part of Volk's game seems to be clinching against the fence and actually mixing in takedowns. So it makes you wonder how he's going to do this against Islam. What's very concerning, though, is what I thought from the film was the tape against Darren Elkins, and he's clinching with Darren Elkins against the fence, and Darren just picks him up and slams him with ease. And it makes you think, if Darren Elkins can pick up and slam Volk, what can Islam do? And then I was watching his previous fights, and I was thinking, well, let's see his takedown defense recently. And Aldo didn't shoot one takedown. Max didn't shoot one takedown in 3 fights. Korean Zombie didn't shoot any takedowns. Ortega tried to take him down. He showed real good takedown defense in that fight, but Ortega's not much of a wrestler. So he hasn't really had to deal with much wrestlers late into his career. To be honest, Islam looked a bit sloppy when he first joined the UFC. He got KO'd, but ever since then, he's just kept to his game plan, looked better and better. There was heaps of talk when he was about to fight for the title, saying he didn't deserve his title shot, but after watching all his tape, you just realise how much better he is than everyone he fights, and it makes you realise that it's going to take someone special to beat Islam. And it makes you think, if anyone's special, it's probably the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world. I hope Volk shows good takedown defense. I hope he scrambles to his feet. I hope he's got the power to take him out, but I think what's much more likely is Islam's going to drag him down, overpower him, show him the size discrepancy, and get a submission in the second or third round. The only time we've ever seen Islam lose is when he got hit with an absolutely devastating hook that would have knocked anyone out, and I just don't think we've seen Alexander have that sort of power in the last few years or ever. So my heart says Volk, my head says Islam. Last time I went with my heart, I lost, so I'm going to go Islam to get a second or third round submission. But I'm going to be sitting there cheering for Volk and hoping he pulls off the double champ status in his home country. That would be legendary, one of the biggest Australian sporting moments ever. And I think Volk matches up with quite a few lightweights well. His hardest match is Islam, so I mean, I'd be keen to see an Alexander Volkanovski reign, but I don't think it's going to happen. Give me Islam submission. Right, if we're going to make a couple of little parlays, I think the safest parlay of the night would be Jack Jenkins paying $1.29. I think that's actually still pretty good. JDM paying $1.29, and Josh Emmett, who would be probably the most value on an underdog for the night. That's paying a nice little $3.74. I think this has got real good odds of coming through. If you wanted to go a bit crazy, I mean, Tukhugov should get the job done. Loma, Lookboonmee, I think she's going to piece up Elise Reed. And if you wanted a couple more underdogs, I think the best value on them would probably be Alonzo Menifield at $2.75. Parker Porter, I mean, I think he could get a decision, but I can see Justin Tafa knocking him out. And if you, what's this playing? This is paying a 16-1. If you wanted to get really crazy, chuck in Francisco Prado, the young 20-year-old kid from Argentina that's just been knocking everyone out, paying 3-1, sort of giving you Rodrigues, Bruno Ferreira vibes from the other weekend. If we look at that, that's paying 50-1. Bit of a lottery ticket, but I mean, hey, got to be in it to win it. Cheers for watching the video, guys. I've been enjoying making these, enjoying watching the film actually. I've appreciated the comments, the likes, the subscriptions. Keep it up, and I will see you in the next one.